caution. Your paradigm is about to shift at the intersection of fact and reason. You're entering Kingston Country.
I'm Dan Kingston, and you're listening to the Dan Kingston Podcast. Schools in Japan are closed, prayers in Iran canceled, and pilgrims in Saudi Arabia barred. Stock markets fall on the expectation of many more cases being uncovered in the United States, especially California, especially San Francisco, where I'm from. 48 countries have been touched so far by the coronavirus, and recently, coronavirus was found in individuals in the U.S. and Germany that did not travel to any of the known affected areas. And of course, that raises the likelihood of undetected community transmission happening right now. Thousands of people in the U.S. are under voluntary quarantine, and officials warn that schools in the U.S. may be forced to close if this thing starts to spread. And breaking news, Mexico has now confirmed 2 cases of coronavirus. Mexico City, the population's over 8 million. It's extremely densely populated. And the question is, would a Latin American outbreak cause a flood of refugees into the United States? Joining the podcast today is Susan Swift, political commentator and prolific writer of political books and articles. And you can visit her at susanswift.net. Thanks, Susan, for joining the podcast today.
Well, thanks so much for having me, Dan. I really appreciate it.
Well, it's amazing. The article you wrote 2 weeks ago, will coronavirus trigger mass influx of refugees fleeing South America? It's like you're psychic and you predicted what would happen, because now today we have those 2 confirmed cases. So what made you think of this, written 2 weeks ago, and are you concerned about this?
Well, my brother is a forensic pathologist. There are less than 500 forensic pathologists in the United States. It's a dwindling resource that we have because it takes so long to, get all the medical training necessary. But these people, forensic pathologists, they know what kill you, right? And he's also a brilliant man. And he and I were talking about that about 2 weeks ago. What if? What if? And you see, it's not, look, coronavirus is not the big problem. It is a flu, and most people are surviving it, right? It kills the very young, those with immune deficiency problems, of the very old. What we're seeing out of China, we don't even know if the numbers are correct, but coronavirus itself is very survivable. The issue is not that; it's the slowdown of the products coming out of China. That people are quarantined, no one's working, and so there's a supply chain issue. But bigger than that, and this is what I was discussing with my brother-in-law. Well, what happens when we were watching what was going on in China? There's women who they're desperate to get out. There was one who left to her death, trying to avoid the quarantine, avoid the government shutdown, the containment efforts, right? And what happens, and that's a communist, this is the perfect communist country in the world, right? China. It has first world medicine, and it has all of these people that it can command in this world because it's communist, right? And this is the same country who did the great leap forward and ended up killing 20 to 30 million of its people because it just put them under the lash to raise more corn, to build more, rice paddies, etc. Everything that they did to try to catch up the United States. This is the same country, and what they're simply doing, they're locking people inside. They're saying, you are going to be quarantined. Well, people are trying to escape that. Okay, so project that now onto a global stage. And what we were thinking is, all right, well, there are Latin American countries like Venezuela who are under the dictator, socialist, communist dictators there who they're starving their people. Socialism doesn't work. Every time it's tried, it ends up killing people, and that nothing new under the sun there. In Venezuela, under Nicolas Maduro, he's been there for 8 years. The average Venezuelan has lost 24 pounds, like in 2018, and children are dying of malnutrition. This is Venezuela. It's oil rich. It's an amazing country with full of vibrant people who are now starving to death under a socialist dictator, right? Well, what happens, simply, what happens if coronavirus comes to a poor country with third world resources, doesn't have the first world medical resources that America has, right? What happens? Well, people, just like the woman in China who jumped to her death to avoid the quarantine, just like more people who are trying to get away from or isolate themselves, or they don't want to catch this, right? It is possible, and that's what I postulated in the article, is, well, what if they decide, look, we can get to America. America is the light of the world. America has the best of the best people, the best medicine, the best teachers, the best system. It's freedom. And that's what capitalism has created. We lead the world in medical advances because we have a private system. And that is what the danger of socialism is. They want to shut down big pharma. They want to control. They want the Obamacare extended again to crush any kind of private medical system. But that's precisely the system that is actually working on a cure right now. So the rest of the world, no. People from Canada, they say, the system in Canada is free. If you can stand to wait long enough, 9 months to get in to see your doctor, many people come to America for medical treatment because we are known as, we are the leader in the world in medical health care, and we're going to be fine.
Someone wrote on my Twitter, they said, no one sick with coronavirus is going to cross over the border. And I was thinking in my mind, it's not the sick people that are going to cross the border. It's all the people escaping and running away from the sick people. Just like you say, 2% or so, maybe less, is a mortality rate. Most people aren't dropping dead from the disease. Most of it is a disruption. The closing of the workplace and the economic disruption. And if schools get shut down and public places get shut down and air flight gets shut down, that's a real big disruption to the economy and to a way of life. I want to quote from your article, okay? Because it just predicts what would happen. And you wrote, what will happen if the coronavirus epidemic hits underdeveloped Central or South American nations whose weak healthcare infrastructures cannot handle such an emergency? Faced with the threat of dangerous contagion, people in those nations predictably may flee and seek sanctuary, and you guessed it, the United States. So it makes sense, right? And they're not like China, where they have strict ability to quarantine. In these countries, they don't have that infrastructure to quarantine. So it could see a major flood of refugees, right?
Right, we're talking about, mostly healthy people. We're not, look, the very, very sick they're not going to walk from Venezuela, but we saw this already. We already saw in 2014, we saw a surge of I think there were 60,000 migrants, unaccompanied children. Remember the children's trains from Central America? They poured across our border, and Obama spread them all throughout the 50 states, right? That was the actual humanitarian crisis on the border. Of course, that was the precursor to, okay, let's just get them all in. Well, that's already happened. And those people who were coming here, they were encouraged. Some were fleeing violence, so they're fleeing a negative, but others were seeking the positive of, I want to come to America because I'll be able to have a better life. I could maybe get citizenship. So there was a combination of negative and positive factors that were creating that surge. Political, to be sure, was one of them. But now we're looking at, this is a singular fear. This is one thing is, oh my gosh, I don't want to get coronavirus. I want to go somewhere where the epidemic is not going to, make me sick. I think I'll go north. I'll go to America. And so it's not the idea so much of, okay, the coronavirus will cross our southern border as the illness. Well, we already have, 15 cases in the United States right now. Or 60,
Thousands of people are being monitored, especially right here in California and San Francisco, and I think it's going to be the tip of an outbreak here in California. But I want to ask you about that large influx of refugees. If you and I both think it's a major possibility, how do you prepare to humanely care for, I mean, do you build massive quarantine centers like they're doing in China, or do you simply turn a gun on people like some people on Twitter say, you should turn a gun on them and tell them to go away? I think that if you prepare now, couldn't we set up humane quarantine centers and anticipate a large influx of refugees?
Well, interestingly enough, I mean, President Trump slowed travel from China. He's been trying to do these. He's been trying to build the wall. How do you stop people from en masse walking across our border and just coming in? Well, that's the wall. This is the combination of this black swan epidemic with border security.
We don't have the wall, and it won't be built in time, so I'm worried. Everywhere. So what do we do now? Because this is going to happen faster than the wall could ever be built, right?
I think it would be prudent for Trump to declare a temporary pause in immigration. Just pause everything. Just say, look, we're not taking anybody in right now at all. Just stop any immigration flow across the borders at all or anywhere.
Should he move the military onto the border and put drones? And what extent do we need to prepare for a large influx of refugees, or can we adapt it when it happens and we don't have to prepare right now?
I think our military is the best in the world, and they would be able to adapt to anything that was necessary. But look, the border, vast parts of the border are across the desert into Texas and Arizona. A lot of people aren't going to cross there. The desert itself is forbidding. However, there are tunnels. I just read, I guess it was on Drudge or somewhere today, there was 126 tunnels under the border just discovered. That's why it's very important to have border security and to be able to have the funds necessary to actually secure our border. I think what Trump's been trying to do for 3 years is admirable, and yet, of course, the Democrats are thwarting all of it. I'm hoping that the Democrats will stop politicizing the issue of border security and stop politicizing the issue of coronavirus. Right. The two are linked.
Yes.
And whether or not, the fear is what is going to drive many people to America. And how do you turn them away? What do you say? What do you do? You say, well, as you said, maybe we put a bunch of camps on the border. Well, what does that do? The people can't stay there. We can't indefinitely house people or feed them, because that's what you're talking about. That's the humanitarian crisis. And I'll bet you that Trump's probably already thought about this and probably has a plan that he was formulating already, and not he himself, of course, his administration. But this is something that is a predictable outcome from the fear-mongering that is going on. Look, for the vast majority of people, at least what we have now, what the information we have now, is a 2-week flu, and most people survive it. Most people are fine. And
but Susan, I have to say, when it's possibly 2% mortality rate, okay, but even if it's 1% mortality rate, that's significant number of deaths if you talk about a large infection, okay, if it does spread. So that's why people are concerned. But I do think it's being blown out of proportion, because the most harm will come from those economic disruptions people are likely to face. Yeah. Well, stay with me 1 second while we take a quick break.
This is Kingston Country.
We're back on with Susan Swift, a prolific writer, and of articles and books. You can see her on Breitbart, also susanswift.net. Now, Susan, you have a new book I want to talk about. Actually, can you talk about the new book that you're writing? Because I think has it been announced anywhere? I mean, it is really new, right?
It is really, really new. I think you're going to be the first one that's talking about it on the podcast, I think, because I don't think it's really been out there yet. We did release it in January, on January 21st. My co-author, Kevin Fobbs, and I wrote it, and it's called Shut Yo Mouth, How the Left Plays the Race Card to Silence Conservatives and How to Stop It. And it's calling out all of the different ways in which the left plays the race card, but it does it in a very unique way, because nobody talked about how they use the social justice warriors and the useful idiots on social memes and in the internet to do what they do. We already know the ideologues and what they say. This book touches on how they have created a propaganda machine for 150 years, starting with trying to silence books like by Mark Twain, by Harriet Beecher Stowe, who wrote Uncle Tom's Cabin. That was the first major attempt that they wanted to silence that book, Uncle Tom's Cabin, because it was a story, a very beautifully written story of a heroic figure, a Christ-like figure, Uncle Tom, who gave up his life to protect the whereabouts of two runaway slaves. And he was beaten to death savagely by his master, right? And he said he was not going to give up the location. And so this very noble story, it's not a true account, it was her creation. Harriet Beecher Stowe, she was a very religious writer. She crafted this character to show his selflessness, and so that whites in her audience would recognize that this black character had a soul and was as divinely inspired as any other person, right? That all men are created equal. That was the purpose of her writing this story, right? It actually led to one of the causes for the Civil War, because people read her books. It was printed for millions of copies, and it really galvanized a section of the population of the United States to go to war to free the slaves, right? And what happened later? Marcus Garvey, he was the one who decided to twist the word Uncle Tom and turn it into a pejorative for political reasons. And now if you call someone an Uncle Tom, you're calling them a bootlicker, somebody who fawns and does what the white person wants. It's a terrible insult to call that. Well, that spin was done by a Democrat, by Marcus Garvey, by people in the political, Democrat Party. And that's just one example of what we talk about in the book. Wow. The fun part of the book is there's tons of words you just can't say if you're white. Yeah. And there's a whole chapter on racist foods. I bet you didn't know there's a bunch of racist foods out there, according to AOC and others. But it goes through.
What's the racist food? What's the most racist food?
Well, one of them is cauliflower. That's one of them. Another one of them is, watermelon and chicken. And these are things that you shouldn't. Unfortunately, you shouldn't eat if you're white, right? And there's other foods that that you shouldn't. These are racist foods. And so Kevin and I go through and we lament and we mock how the Democrats have twisted these things for political reasons. They're doing this so that they're trying to silence conservatives, and that's the interesting takeaway from this book, because the word white now is the dog whistle itself. The word white really doesn't mean white, it means conservative, because the attack that the Democrats are bringing is against the Constitution, against the Founding Fathers, and against conservatives everywhere. And so what they do is they take the optics of lots of people who are in media and, the Founding Fathers themselves. Well, yeah, they're white people. All right. So let's conflate the two. Let's just say if you're white and conservative, you're a racist. So they cry racism. That's what they want to do, because they want to look at you and they want to silence you. You can't discuss the ideas of conservatism, because once you start that, they start these ad hominem attacks, which just go up and say, well, you're racist. You can't talk about it. Unfortunately, I could not have written this book without Kevin Fobbs, because he is a black man. I'm a white woman. And together we mock and we laugh at and we point out the hypocrisy on the left, especially on the issue of race. And so we decided to, even in the title, shut yo mouth, because that's a little bit of a southern slang or a dialect of it, is just to tell people what the Democrats are doing. They are the ones who are telling us, well, you better shut up. Don't talk about conservative values, because if you're talking about conservative values, you're obviously racist.
That's fantastic. This is great. Where can people buy the book, Susan?
Well, it's very easy. They can go. It is on Amazon, but I would ask them to please, because Amazon uses up all of the profits. There's not a lot left. We also have it through the website, and it's very easy to remember, which is shutyomouth.com. So it's Shut, S-H-U-T, Yo, Y-O, no U in there, shutyomouse.com, and you can buy it right there. You can read about it. You even get the preview of the first chapter of the first introduction is right there, and you can enjoy it. And you can see what kind of book. It's not your traditional political book. It's not 300 pages just filled full of tiny 11-point font just going on and on and on. It has over 120 memes, original memes, and it goes through in a very funny way to kind of point out and laugh at these social justice warriors on the internet and on memes and throughout the Democrat Party.
Well, it sounds terrific, and I'll link to that in the description of this podcast episode. Susan Swift, thank you so much for joining the podcast today and your expertise, and, well, please come back on the podcast anytime.
Anytime, Dan. I really appreciate the opportunity. Thanks so much. God bless.
Kingston Country. You've been listening to the Dan Kingston Podcast.
Dan Kingston here, asking you to do me a huge favor. Will you possibly rate the Dan Kingston Podcast on Apple Podcasts? Each new rating, believe it or not, really does have a major impact on the way Apple's algorithm recommends content. With just one quick click, you can help promote citizen journalism and end the stranglehold of the mainstream media. Together, we're going to do this. Thank you. I really appreciate your support.